Thank you. Hope this works. Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Max, and I'm presenting Germ Destroyer, a gamified system to increase the hand washing duration in shared bathrooms, which is work I did together with Pascal, Lessel, Marc, Schubhan, Vladislav, Hnatovskiy, and Krüger. So why is hand washing important? Well, keeping hands clean is one of the most important steps we can take to avoid getting sick and spreading germs to others. It's what is stated on the website of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. However, if we look at hand washing behavior in the real life, we face two main issues. So the first one is that people do it with the wrong technique, and the second one is people do it much too short. And in this work, we try to tackle this problem, so people washing their hands for a too short amount of time. The hand washing duration is a key factor for removing microorganisms, and research actually suggests you to wash your hands for 15 to 20 seconds, as this provides more or less the best benefit-cost ratio. However, if you look into studies that actually investigated this, you see that 32% of people do not wash their hands at all, and of those that do wash their hands, they do it for like an average of 6 seconds. So this is much too short. And therefore, we came up with the Germ Destroyer system, which you can see here. So it basically consists of two parts that communicate via Bluetooth Low Energy. We have a hardware part and a software part. The hardware part consists of a measuring unit, which can be mounted on the water tap. You can see that on the left side. And the software part consists of a gameful mobile application that tries to encourage you to meet the recommended hand washing duration. We have different screens there. So we have one idle screen, which you can see on the left, that shows kind of a hand washing animation to remind people to wash their hands. And once they start washing their hands, germs appear. And by washing hands for some time, you can kill those germs and gather points which are aggregated and shown on a daily basis. So you can see this on the picture C. If people quit washing hands too early, these germs turn angry, which you can see on picture B. And if you manage to wash for a long enough time, you actually get a rewarding animation and the sound is being played. So the hardware part of this system can be seen in these pictures. So as I said, it can be mounted on a water tap and can be fixed with a screw. In terms of, or regarding the sensors that we used, you can see that on the left. We used one infrared sensor to actually measure whether hands are present or not. And we used one capacitive sensor in the inside of the tube to actually measure whether water is flowing or not. All parts are 3D printed. We used as a microcontroller, that can be seen in picture B, we used the Adafruit Feather microcontroller that already has Bluetooth Low Energy support on board. And all components, so like the code for the Gameful app, the code for the firmware of this microcontroller, as well as the 3D models and also the cutscenes for this laser cut stand that we did can be found on GitHub. So if you want to use this, or if you want to build on that, or simply want to try it out, you can download all components on GitHub. You can also find the link in the paper. So what did we want to investigate? Well, we wanted to look at whether hand washing is actually more enjoyable when using our system, whether hand washing for 20 seconds seems shorter to participants when using our system, whether Germ Destroyer actually increases the hand washing duration, whether it also increases the amount of hand washing sessions meeting the recommended duration, and whether the amount of bacteria on the door handle actually decreases when using our Germ Destroyer. And we did this by running two studies. So we had one lab study where we investigated the user experience of the system, and one in the wild study where we investigated age 3, 4, and 5. Coming first to the lab study, so here you can see the procedure of this study. We had 14 participants. First of all, they filled out demographic data and stuff, and then they were told to wash hands for 20 seconds without using our Germ Destroyer application. Afterwards, had to fill out some questionnaires. So we used the intrinsic motivation inventory, the positive and negative effect schedule, as well as some questions regarding their time perception. Then they were again told to wash hands for 20 seconds using our system, and filled out the same questionnaires. Again, of course, these two conditions were counterbalanced as we used it within subjects design. Within. Coming to the results. So on the left side, you see the results of the intrinsic motivation inventory. So as you can see, no effects could have been found for competence, choice, or pressure. However, if you look into the enjoyment subscale, you see a significant increase there from, actually it almost doubles. So this was quite positive, and this is also supported by results from the positive and negative effect schedule. You see that the positive effect also significantly increased. Looking at the perceived duration, we also see that participants estimated a shorter time that they had washed their hands when using our Germ Destroyer application. To sum up the first study, we found evidence supporting the first hypothesis that hand washing is more enjoyable with Germ Destroyer, and we also found support for the second one that hand washing for 20 seconds seems shorter to participants when actually using our system. Coming to the individual test, here we decided to test our system in the men's bathroom of a larger company. We decided for the men's bathroom as we had problems with privacy-related issues. You can find more on that in the paper. That's why we just stick to the men's bathroom. If you have questions on that, you can ask, of course. So we did the study for 10 days. The system was installed between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m. And to assess actually the amount of bacteria on the door handle, we used TPC test slides that are commercially available. And we incubated them for 24 hours with or at 37 degrees Celsius. And the door handle was disinfected every morning. So here's like the procedure. So we had 5 days where only our measuring device was active and 5 days where we additionally introduced the gameful Germ Destroyer application. And overall, we counted 363 hand washing sessions in our study. So looking at the results, we see the mean duration of each day of the study in this graph. So the first 5 days were without the Germ Destroyer application, and the last 5 days were with the Germ Destroyer application. So here you see that on average, people wash their hands for 5.56 seconds in the baseline phase, which is pretty much perfectly in line with previous research. And when introducing our Germ Destroyer, this significantly increased to 9.30 seconds on average. If you also look at the amount of hand washing sessions meeting the recommended duration, you see that in the baseline, only 3.73% of hand washing sessions were actually long enough, whereas this climbed up significantly to 26.73% in the intervention phase. Coming to the bacterial counts. Here we actually looked at the amount of colony-forming units. You can see the pictures of the test slides for each day of the study here. So in the first 5 days, we counted an average of 90.40 colony-forming units and a median of 79, whereas this significantly decreased to 33.60 colony-forming units and a median of 21 in the intervention phase. So to sum up, the second study provided more or less evidence for all 3 hypotheses that we had. Coming to some limitations. We had a lot of them. You can find them in the paper. But I just picked the main ones here. So, of course, we only looked at the men's bathroom. The study duration was, of course, not long enough to draw conclusions on the long-term behavior or long-term success of the system. So it was just 10 days. Also, it should be considered that the water consumption is higher when people actually wash their hands for a longer time. And we also have some limitations regarding how we assess the amount of colony-forming units. So we decided to go for the door handle. But of course, we cannot rule out that people actually kind of wash their hands, then touch something else like their face, and then the door handle. So this is something that should definitely be considered. To sum up, I presented Germ Destroyer, a gamified system to encourage people to meet or to wash their hands for a long enough time. We found evidence that our system makes hand washing more enjoyable, that hand washing seems shorter to participants, increases the hand washing duration, that Germ Destroyer actually also increases the amount of hand washing sessions meeting the recommended duration, and it leads to a lower amount of bacteria on the door handle. And you can see some pictures of the system in the video, and that's it from my side. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take questions.
Hi.
Hi.
Gabriel Cimolino, Queen's University, Canada. I'm wondering, is there any plan to test the system in a hospital context?
Yeah, so actually, of course, this could be done, but I think in a hospital context, it's more important to actually try to concentrate on the technique, because I think they are very aware of the fact that they need to wash their hands, but there's a lot of work actually trying to teach them on how to do it. But this would, of course, be a context where we could investigate the system, but maybe I don't know if this gameful approach works there very well in this kind of professional context, but sure, why not? So actually, we got a lot of feedback that we should test this in a primary school or so. So we got some teachers that are eager to test this. So maybe a hospital context would also be nice. Yeah. Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Aditya from Northeastern University. Maybe I missed that in your presentation, but how did you measure the duration exactly?
Yeah, so the duration was measured basically whenever we were sure that the hands were being present and the water was flowing. This was the duration that we measured.
Jan van Hang, Aalto University, Finland. I was wondering when you, on the one slide where you had the duration that significantly increased after you introduced the game, it also looked like that the standard deviation heavily increased.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, what that could have been?
Yeah, so the standard deviations actually did increase, that's true. We are not pretty sure because it wasn't a kind of anonymous data collection, so we actually also don't know how many participants we actually had, so we can only give an estimate on that. We think we had around 30 participants, but of course it could be that some of them are more like, I don't know, they are more used to playing games or found this cooler than others. We don't know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Stuart Halifax from the University of Jean Moulin from Lyon.
Hi.
I have a question about, were the participants sort of informed before this device was put in place? There's a lot of talk about novelty effects and things like that, like introducing these in new situations where there is generally like an uptake in the first couple of days or hours it's being used. Did you observe something like that? Did you observe like a novelty rumor about this cool device being put in and people using it a lot more in the first days that then dropped off in the end? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we actually installed a sign there so that also participants are free to choose another bathroom, that they know that we're kind of collecting this data. And also in the baseline phase, we had the whole system there, but just not the mobile application. But of course, you're totally right. One main limitation is that we just did it for 5 or for 10 days. So of course, novelty effects could be there. However, if you think about this context, so like a shared bathroom, which might also work at airports, then you might not have this kind of novelty effect, or of course you have it, but it's not really bad because people are coming by and are just like not very used to using the system every day. But of course, this is a limitation, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Leonard Nacke, University of Waterloo. First of all, love the study. I think this is one of those crazy ideas where maybe somebody sits down and says, okay, let's use science to tackle a weird problem. And I love that you did the bacteria count and everything. That's just awesome. A little much, all of it maybe. But so what I'd like to, because this is like a commercial system, I think. This is something that somebody could commercialize. You might have heard about that little fly that you see in male toilets where people pee on, and that's actually super successful, right? So somebody made a lot of money just with an image of a fly on a toilet. But with this, have you investigated other ways of displaying maybe? Because I'm thinking like usability concerns where I'm looking down on my hands inside of the bowl where I wash in, or maybe even on the mirror. But right now you got this clunky device that's right next to it. Have you looked into displaying it in different areas, like maybe the mirror or maybe down where you wash your hands, where you're actually looking at, or was that not a concern at all?
So for this study, we actually did not think about that. But of course, like afterwards, we got some feedback also from the company. And then we discussed ways of, for example, projecting it into the sink, like with a different game, of course, or just using a see-through mirror or something like that and directly integrate it into the mirror. But yeah, we did not really kind of build on that or follow up on that.
Do you know if somebody is this being even considered for commercial use?
I guess not. So far, I think it's not considered. No.
Are you on the patent?
All right, let's control our speakers.